G'day folks, Sapper here with another World of Warships video. Welcome to In Depth, the series with theory crafting and analysis where we see how deep rabbit holes can get. Before we get started, if this is your first Commonwealth video of mine, I suggest you go and check out my Commonwealth Tech Tree overview, link will be down in the video description. In this video I'm going to go over in detail my proposed Commonwealth Destroyer line. First up, some caveats. The Commonwealth, for the purposes of this video, includes all the nations that were a member of the Commonwealth at that time, including countries such as India, Pakistan, Malaysia, Singapore and South Africa. A lot of ships will share similarities with Royal Navy ships. That's fine. Hader isn't the same as Jarvis, and a lot of the differences between destroyers comes down to things that wargaming arbitrarily define or tweak, such as reload, shell characteristics, torpedo arcs, concealment or consumables. I always attempt to include ship classes that a spread of Commonwealth nations operated, however I prioritise progression of the line from a gameplay perspective first and foremost. I envisage the Commonwealth Destroyer line borrowing some elements from Hader, but being different enough to leave Hader in her own special position. The fundamental principle of this line is that while these ships are mostly Royal Navy ships or designs, the Commonwealth did some tweaking under the hood. These ships were often operated for far longer than the Royal Navy would consider, and subsequently received further tweaks over the years, particularly in electronics. Any Commonwealth destroyer line will invariably be compared to Royal Navy destroyers, so I'll embrace that and use that as a point of reference so that you have an idea about where ships would fit into World of Warships, particularly as far as gameplay or flavour. Make no mistake however, this line is very much different. Commonwealth destroyers in my proposal will have the following characteristics when compared to Royal Navy. Better alpha strike, better shell ballistics, lower DPM, improved concealment. The consumable options for the line would be as follows. All tiers would have access to Commonwealth or Hader's Creeping Smoke, which is a 90-second emission time, 80-second cooldown. At tier 5, Commonwealth or Hader Hydro, which is 180-second duration that detects torpedoes at 2.5 kilometers and ships at 3.5 kilometers. At tier 7, standard DFAA or speed boost. At tier 8, radar as an option in the creeping smoke slot. Putting these characteristics and consumables into a package should result in Commonwealth destroyers losing straight up gunfights with their Royal Navy cousins, but winning in situations where they can initiate or dictate the terms of the engagement with their utility and concealment. Assuming some form of submarine implementation in the future, this equipment kit would function well for ASW duties that many Commonwealth destroyers engaged in extensively historically. Radar should be adjusted as required, but a good starting point would be the radar run by Pan-Asian destroyers. There are a couple of gameplay loops that these characteristics and equipment synergize to create. Screening spec. Screening spec is much the same as conventional destroyer tactics. However, in this instance, Commonwealth Destroyer has a slight advantage over other destroyers in that their smoke is mobile. Commonwealth destroyers will be able to outspot any gun-based threats and outgun any stealthier threats. For those who prefer to give the middle finger to aircraft carriers, DFAA could assist with that. Otherwise, Speed Boost offers that extra oomph to get to safety or bully an enemy as needed. Ambush spec. In this spec, the tier 8 to 10 Commonwealth destroyer would pick radar over smoke and Speed Boost over DFAA. The Commonwealth destroyer can aggressively or opportunistically engage radar to catch out an enemy destroyer, and then fire a few salvos before the enemy can react. After this, the Commonwealth destroyer can engage Speed Boost and Hydro to bully the enemy destroyer and maintain contact for longer, or escape as the situation dictates. If Commonwealth destroyers sound overly strong, good, I'm trying to sell the idea to you, but the quality of a ship is often in its weaknesses. So what sort of situations are they going to be weak in? Straight up gunfights. In particular against stronger gunboat destroyers. In exchanges based on DPM, Commonwealth destroyers should not be best in tier, but sit somewhere a bit under that. They are still gun-focused destroyers, but their strength is less DPM and more in shell ballistics and shell damage. When chased down by a faster destroyer. While Commonwealth destroyers should be quicker than some, even with speed boost on, many other destroyers such as the French will still be able to chase them down. In this situation, Commonwealth destroyers are highly dependent on Allied cover to prevent this from happening. When outspotted. While only the stealthiest Japanese torpedo destroyers should have better concealment, these destroyers will likely be speedier at many tiers, giving them the spotting and speed advantage. This exchange should be fairly even. If a stealthier enemy can keep the Commonwealth destroyer spotted, they win the exchange. If the Commonwealth destroyer can close the gap and engage with better tools and guns, the fight should go to the Commonwealth. Balancing all of these different factors, the primary levers that will need to be adjusted are health pool and reload. The specifics of in-game numbers on each ship I've deliberately left blank. That is a matter for wargaming should they implement the line. My Commonwealth videos are merely to demonstrate the feasibility of Commonwealth ships that are somehow forgotten and yet were far more real than many ship lines in the game. Alright, so onto the ships. Speed values were often listed and reported at a certain value, and yet, in real terms, the ship would be far quicker. For this purpose, speed values like health pool, concealment, and reload would be subject to change based on balance. Depth charges I will merely list and leave at that. The status of submarines is still an ongoing question at the time of recording. As usual folks, forgive my pronunciation. I will definitely get at least a few wrong along the line. The Tier 1 Indus I'll cover in the Commonwealth Cruiser video. All you need to know is that it's a Grimsby class operated by India, and the Grimsby class was also operated by New Zealand Station and Australia. Tier 2, Champlain. Champlain is a 1917 S-class destroyer. S-class destroyers were operated by both Australia and Canada. Australia operated Stalwart, Success, Swordsman, Tasmania, and Tattoo. Canada operated Champlain and Vancouver. S-Class was a very easy choice, being similar in armament and era to other Tier 2 destroyers in the game. Champlain has the following specs: 3 single 102mm guns, 2 twin 533mm torpedo launchers, 31 knot speed, creeping smoke, and depth charges. Champlain should play much like any Tier 2 destroyer. She is similar in specs to Royal Navy's Medea, however a little bit more modern in equipment and a little bit weightier. Tier 3, Waterhen. Waterhen is a W-class destroyer. V and W-class destroyers served with Australia, including Vampire, Vendetta, and Voyager. A V or W-class destroyer was an easy pick, being it's a clear upgrade from the S-class, and that Commonwealth already have Vampire and the Royal Navy already have Valkyrie. By going with Waterhen, we get a similar ship, but not too similar thanks to her armament. Waterhen has the following specs: 4 single 102mm guns, 2 triple 533mm torpedoes, 34 knot speed, creeping smoke, and depth charges. Waterhen is similar to her V-class sisters Vampire and Valkyrie. She differentiates herself from them with 2 triple torpedoes instead of Vampire's 1 triple and Valkyrie's 2 twins. Tier 4, Stuart. Stuart is a Scott-class destroyer. Stuart is a hard pick to make, being one lone ship that was used by Australia. However, she provides excellent design links between the earlier World War I destroyers and the later interwar and World War II destroyers in the line. Stuart has the following specs: 5 single 120mm guns, 2 triple 533mm torpedoes, 34 knot speed, creeping smoke, and depth charges. Stuart is the first ship of the line to be armed with 120mm guns, and 5 of them at that. In this sense, she is the perfect opportunity to start developing the higher Alpha Strike flavour over damage per minute for the Commonwealth when compared to Royal Navy. Tier 5, Skeena. Skeena is an A-class destroyer. Canada operated many A-class destroyers, as well as those of similar design, for example, C and D classes. Ships for reference from Canada include Skeena, Sanguinay, Assiniboine, Fraser, Ottawa, Restigou, St. Laurent, Kootenay, and Marjorie. Skeena has the following specs: 4 single 120mm guns, 2 quad 533mm torpedoes, 36 knot speed, creeping smoke, Commonwealth hydro, and depth charges. Skeena is the first Commonwealth destroyer to have access to hydro, empowering her screening, ambushing, and ASW capabilities. Tier 6, Chaudière. Chaudière is a H-class destroyer. Canada operated Chaudière from the H-class and Ottawa from G-class. Both shared many traits from the preceding Canada destroyers that were all collectively known as River-class destroyers. Chaudière has the following specs: 4 single 120mm guns, 2 quad 533mm torpedoes, 36 knot speed, creeping smoke, Commonwealth hydro, and depth charges. Chaudière should play much like a Skeena, but at Tier 6, with incremental improvements in areas appropriate for tier. Skeena and Chaudière could almost be argued to be rolled into the same ship. However, I have seen many Commonwealth destroyer ideas that splits them further, more than just the two that I've done. Personally, I feel that 2 entries in the line is fair and allows room for progression up the line. Tier 7, Jan van Riebeck. Jan is a W-class destroyer. South Africa operated 3 W-class destroyers after World War II: Jan van Riebeck, Simon van der Stel, and Vroegstadt. Jan van Riebeck has the following specs: 4 single 120mm guns, 2 quad 533mm torpedoes, 36 knot speed, creeping smoke, Commonwealth hydro, DFAA or speed boost, and depth charges. Jan is the first entry in the Commonwealth destroyer line to have the added DFAA or speed boost consumable slot. She is also the last ship in the Commonwealth destroyer line to be equipped with single gun mounts. In most other regards, Jan functions like a bigger, more modern version of the preceding Chaudière and Skeena. The alternative option for Tier 7 would have been the tribal class, and it was a seriously hard decision. However, there are already 2 tribals in the game, being Haida and Cossack, and both are special in their own right. I wanted those 2 to remain that way, and that's why tribal wasn't considered as an option for Tier 7 or Tier 8. Jan fits well into the line at Tier 7 and gives Commonwealth an entry from South Africa. Tier 8, Napier. Napier is an N-class destroyer. Australia operated Napier, Nestor, Nizam, Norman, and Nepal. Napier has the following specs: 3 dual 120mm guns, 2 Pentad 533mm torpedoes, 36 knot speed, creeping smoke or radar, Commonwealth hydro, DFAA or speed boost, and depth charges. Napier is notable as she has the option to run radar instead of creeping smoke, giving her an aggressive tool to assist in ambushing enemy destroyers. Napier is notable for the transition from single to dual turret mounts, and is a key link between single 120mm guns found on Jan van Riebeck and the dual 113mm guns found on the Tier 9 and Tier 10. Tier 9, Battle. Different types of battle-class destroyers saw use by Australia and Pakistan. Australia operated Anzac and Tobruk, and Pakistan operated Badr and Khyber. Battle has the following specs: 2 twin 113mm guns, 2 Pentad 533mm torpedoes, 36 knot speed, creeping smoke or radar, Commonwealth hydro, DFAA or speed boost, and depth charges. Battle is the first ship to shift to 113mm guns and is notable for only having 2 twin turrets, similar to Europe's Friesland. As such, a lot of her balance will come from reload, assuming shell damage is consistent, meaning she may be a bit of an oddball for the line. However, by leveraging the difference in the number of guns over Royal Navy's Jutland, difference can be maintained. Battle will probably be the most difficult Commonwealth destroyer to balance, primarily due to the forward-facing guns. Battle may need quick turret traverse and good firing arcs for her to be effective, owing to the lack of a rear turret. Thankfully, her design does allow for 360-degree turrets. That will mitigate some of her configuration challenges. Battle was always an easy pick for Tier 9, being that the Tier 10 is an Australian daring, and Battle provides a clear progression to that as far as armament and design. The choice about the name was whether to name battle Khyber and have an Australian premium, or vice versa. Given that Pakistan had a limited number of ships, and premium ships have more room for uniqueness and character, I chose to have battle at Tier 9 and Khyber as the premium option. Tier 10, Vendetta. Vendetta was an Australian Daring class destroyer. Australia built and operated 3 Daring class destroyers, Vampire, Vendetta, and Voyager, with Vampire and Vendetta seeing service into the 1970s. Vendetta has the following specs: 3 twin 113mm guns, 2 Pentad 533mm torpedoes, 36 knot speed, creeping smoke or radar, Commonwealth hydro, DFAA or speed boost, and depth charges. Vendetta is very much going to share some similarities with Daring. For Vendetta, while she only had the one set of torpedo tubes historically, her sister ship Voyager had 2, and so did many Darings. The primary difference between Vendetta and Daring will be in the differences between Commonwealth and Royal Navy. However, at the outset, Daring will have more effective health thanks to her heel and higher DPM, whereas Vendetta will have slightly better mobility, concealment, and alpha strike. In summary, the Commonwealth Destroyer line progresses well for main armament. Tiers 2 and 3 are armed with 102mm single mount guns. Tiers 4 to 7 are armed with 120mm single mount guns. Tier 8 is armed with 120mm dual mount guns. And Tier 9 and 10 are armed with 113mm dual mount guns. It also progresses fairly well with the original commission date and size, although there are some outliers. The line progression makes sense from a gameplay perspective, as much as was possible, and often more so than ship lines already in the game. When conceptualising this line, I drew heavily on Perth and Hadar, but also about how the Commonwealth used these ships, and how all of this could find a niche within World of Warships. I really like the idea of a line of ships that lean heavily on utility with a strong ambush ability that doesn't end up playing the same as existing lines. While there will be similarities between Commonwealth and Royal Navy destroyers, they should play differently enough, particularly with the Commonwealth's creeping smoke and radar options, not to mention with more of a focus on alpha strike. I understand that some of you may perceive an Australian bias in the destroyer line. This simply isn't the case, but I can see how you could come to that conclusion at a glance. The primary contender for some alternative options is Canada. Canada operated more destroyers than other Commonwealth nations, but of a limited number of distinguishable classes. Canada also operated these classes in isolation, and given that my priority is the number of Commonwealth nations that operate a class, as well as a clear progression up the line, we end up with the line as is. Another strong influence on my decision making was the existing Commonwealth premiums. I wanted to populate the premium and overall tech tree with as many nations and ship types as possible, which then left tech tree options as they are. For example, at Tier 9 with Battle or Khyber, Tier 7 with Jan van Riebeck or Tribal, and Tier 8 with Napier or Tribal. Champlain, Waterhen, Stewart, Skeena, Chartier, Jan van Riebeck, Napier, Battle, Vendetta. What do you think of them? I think they'd be fun and fresh without being alien, exactly what we need more of. Let me know what you think down below. Alternatively, if you'd change a ship or the flavour or anything, how would you do it? Either way, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I know it's taken a while. I'm sorry, but I've got to pay the bills and I've had a lot going on. Hopefully Commonwealth cruises will not be too far away. Thanks for watching everyone, stay sane, and I'll catch you in the next one.